Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to another PS4 video. So we're a couple of days in to the PlayStation Vue jailbreak now, and obviously there's a lot of different opinions about it, especially regarding the higher firmwares. In this video, what I wanted to do here is, first of all, we're going to go over the new update that was released, which is version 1.3, which adds a few new features that are worth talking about here. But also, I wanted to kind of touch base here, go over some of the most common questions that I've been receiving, as well as also how to fix some of the most common issues that people have been running into with this particular exploit. Now, obviously, there is absolutely no doubt that it's very unstable on higher firmwares. Any firmware that has to use the poops kernel exploit to jailbreak, which is 12.50 and above, you are going to have a pretty bad time with this exploit because it's going to require loading the jailbreak many times. And unfortunately, there's no magic wand at the moment to make it more stable. We'll have to see if the developers can do anything over time to improve the stability. There has been a few fixes already for those higher firmwares that have been made in this latest update, but it is still very unstable, requires a lot of attempts to get it running on those firmwares. Compared to firmwares 12.02 and below though, it's a completely different story. On those firmwares, it's incredibly stable and loads incredibly fast once you have the autoloader set up with the lapse kernel exploit. As you can see here on an 11.0 console that I'm running it on here, you can see how incredibly fast this exploit is. I load up the PlayStation Vue application. I have the fake sign-in payload enabled, so it skips that error notification about being signed into PlayStation Network. And with the autoloader, it auto-detects the firmware, immediately starts running the lapse kernel exploit, and within a couple of seconds, we're up and running with Gold 10 on our console. An incredibly fast and stable exploit that does not require any additional devices on firmwares 12.02 and below, but obviously it's a completely different story if you're trying to run this on a firmware above 12.02. So that's the situation so far. Now, before we get into answering some of the most common questions and going over some issues, let's go ahead and take a look at the new update that has been released. So this is Vue After Free version 1.3 that's been released. So the main changes here is that we have a config not found error that's been fixed. The fake sign-in payload has supposedly been added back to the payload menu. Although I haven't seen this after installing it, the fake sign-in payload still seems to be missing when I install this version. So not sure about that one. Also added music toggle button in the config UI, so you can turn off the background music for PlayStation Vue. And then also you've got support loading payloads from the data payloads folder, or MNT USB payloads. This is one of the biggest updates that's been added here, so you can effectively just add any additional payloads that you want to show up in the payloads menu on PlayStation Vue, so that you can load those payloads directly from the application, which is a very handy feature. And then we have fixes for 12.50, 12.52, 13.0, 13.0x mmap offsets. Also refactored the jailbreak checks into a shared helper, and then also attempting to fix check jailbroken, which I guess is to check when you load the PlayStation Vue application and go to run the jailbreak, it checks to see if you're already jailbroken. So some kind of fix there as well. So those are the main updates that have been added. So this version just has the manual setup. It doesn't include a system backup to restore on retails, but if you are on a retail console, you can just restore the version from the previous one. And then once you're jailbroken with Gold 10 or the open source hen, you can then install the manual version to update to version 1.3. So to update to 1.3, you just download the manual setup, extract the download 0.dat file, connect to your console with FTP, or you can of course use PS4 Explorer to copy the files over manually. But with FTP, you just connect with your PS5's IP address, port number 2121, and then you can simply head into the user folder and then the downloads folder and then the CUSA 00960, and simply copy the download 0.dat file from version 1.3 into that folder and overwrite the existing one that's already in there, and that'll get the latest version installed. Supposedly you can put payloads in the MNT USB payloads folder, although when I tried to do this, it did not show up. So the only way I could get custom payloads to appear is to copy them into the data folder at the moment with this version. If you go back to the root directory, you can go into the data folder and then create a payloads folder, right click and create a new directory called payloads if one is not already in there, and then go into that folder, and then you can copy your payloads like the fake sign-in payload for PS4, and then of course any of your main payloads, I guess, you can copy in there, and you'll be able to run them on the console. So if we go ahead and switch back over once again to our PS4, and then we run the PlayStation Vue application, you can see once we get the menu up, we've got the config, so we can disable the music. If you don't want the background music, you can turn that off now. So that's been added. And then also, if we go to the payload menu, you can see we have all of the payloads showing up here. And we can just select one of the PS4 payloads, like the disable updates payload, to execute that on the console, and it will run the elf loader and then execute the payload, so disabled updates on our firmware. So that's one of the main features that's been added in this version. Once you've got the jailbreak loaded, you can come back in here and then load any payloads that you want to run. But anyway, getting into the most common questions, and then also how to fix some of the main issues that people have been running into. So first of all, in terms of who this jailbreak is actually for, because one of the main questions I've been getting is, should you switch to this jailbreak depending on what firmware version you're on? So I would say if you're on firmware 9.60, then I personally would not recommend going with this jailbreak, because you can jailbreak using the web browser, which is generally going to be the most convenient way to jailbreak on your console. So I would just stick with your web browser jailbreak up to 9.60. Once you go past 9.60, if you're still using the ppphone jailbreak up to 11.0, which uses another device like your computer or phone or, Raspberry Pi, Luckfox Pico, some other device that has to send the network data to the console to jailbreak it. So the console is dependent on this other device to be able to jailbreak. If you're in that situation, then I would recommend switching to this PlayStation Vue jailbreak, because you can jailbreak just on the console itself with this application. You don't need an extra device, and you can jailbreak a lot faster using this compared to the ppphone jailbreak. So definitely recommended to switch if you are using that older jailbreak. And then also, of course, people who are using the Blu-ray disc to jailbreak up to 12.02 firmware, you might want to switch to this also, because again, this is just more convenient for running the jailbreak. It's faster running the jailbreak than using the Blu-ray disc, having to load a Blu-ray disc on your console. So that's the general recommendation there. And then obviously if you're on 12.50 or 12.52, I would stick with the Blu-ray jailbreak on those firmwares if you do have a working disk drive, because loading the Poops kernel exploits using the Blu-ray disc is more stable than trying to run it here using the PlayStation Vue application. And if you're on 13.0, unfortunately, despite this being very unstable on that firmware, this is your only option for jailbreaking right now on 13.0. So that's the situation depending on what firmware version you're on. Also, you do not need to update your firmware to run the jailbreak. You can just run it on the same firmware that you use your current jailbreak on, so you can try it out. There's no need to update. I would discourage updating, because obviously if you go past 12.02, then it becomes very unstable. So definitely don't update just to use this jailbreak. You can use it on your current firmware anyway. Okay, so now let's go ahead and cover some of the most common issues that people have been running into, the ones I've seen the most in my comment section on my previous video. So the first one, of course, is the network communication error, where this error just keeps repeating in a loop when you run the PlayStation Vue application. And this is normally because the save file is either corrupted or it's been reset and it's not working. So usually it's the save file that causes this specific issue. So if you did the manual installation method, and it can happen with the backup method too, but if you did the manual installation, then you will have had to install the save file with the Apollo save tool, where you copied the save file onto the root of the USB drive, the PS4 folder, and then you run the Apollo save tool with your previous jailbreak, and you go to the USB saves, and then you copy to HDD. Now, apparently some people are having issues when you copy to HDD. It should rebuild that into an encrypted save for your account ID, so it should work with your account. Although some people have been reporting that's not happening, and they have to apply changes and re-sign. So you may have to do that if you are running into that issue. Apply the changes and re-sign, and then copy the save file over to the HDD, and that should hopefully fix that issue. Another issue is that if you do not have an activated account, and you went to activate your account in Apollo, so your account ID is all zeros, and you activate the account, you do need to reboot your console after activating the account in order for that to be applied. If you don't reboot your console after activation, and then you just go to copy the save file to the HDD, then the account IDs will be mismatched when you do reboot the console, and the save file will look like it's installed, but it will not work. So an activated account is required. So if you do need to activate your account, make sure you reboot the console first after activation, and then copy the save file in Apollo to the HDD after you've rebooted the console first. That way the save file will get built on the HDD for the correct account, and it should work. So that's another issue that you can run into. So that should fix the network communication errors. But if you're not using the Apollo save tool and you're still getting that issue, there is a problem where the save file can get reset. So once you actually get the PlayStation Vue jailbreak set up and installed with the save file, and you have it working at least once, you should copy the save file in the application save data management section to the USB drive. So go to save data in system storage, copy to USB, select the PlayStation Vue save, and copy that out to the USB drive. That way, if the save file does get reset and you start getting that network communication error after it was working previously, then you can just go ahead and restore the save file from the USB by selecting the save data in the USB and then copying it to system storage to get the working save copied back over to the system storage to get the exploits working again with PlayStation Vue. So definitely make a backup of the save file once you have it working, so you can always restore it if you need to. That's very important. The other issue that people are running into is if you get the PlayStation Network error message that's just repeating in a loop, and that tends to happen if the PlayStation Vue application gets updated. Now, if we hit the options button over PlayStation Vue and go to information, you can see I'm on version 1.24. That is the version that you need to be on. If your version is higher than this, like 1.36, then it will not work. So in that case, it has been updated. Maybe you didn't realize it was silently updating in the background. So if you set up your network settings properly when you set up your connection and you use the DNS server of 62.210.38.117, that has a game update blocker built in, so it should block the updates. However, there are some situations where despite adding that DNS server, you could still get game updates. So if you check for updates and it immediately starts trying to download an update file, then you need to immediately go to your downloads and cancel it before it installs. So make sure you do that. But why does this happen even if you have the DNS blocker installed? Well, unfortunately, there are some ISP supplied routers or internet service providers that will actually hijack the DNS requests at either the router level or at the ISP level. And basically, despite having a custom DNS address set on one of your devices, like your PS4, they can just hijack those DNS requests and force them through their own DNS servers. Some ISPs do this in certain countries for whatever reason. So if you add the DNS server and you're still getting game updates, then it's likely that the DNS requests are being hijacked. So if you are running into that issue, then you can set your DNS server to 127.0.0.1. That theoretically should fix it. I'm not really able to test because I don't have that problem. But generally, that should set it to the local host so that all the DNS requests are just going back to the PS4 itself. They should never get out to reach the router to be able to be hijacked. So hopefully that should fix it. That will prevent you from having a proper internet connection on the console, but it will give you a network connection so you can still use PlayStation Vue, and it should properly block the updates. Failing that, you do need a network connection to actually use PlayStation Vue, but not an internet connection. So you could just go ahead and get an old router that you still have or an old switch and just connect the console to that and just have it not connect to anything else so that you don't have an internet connection, but you have a network connection. Or you can get one of the, ESP devices that have a little built-in Wi-Fi chip that can host their own isolated Wi-Fi network that you can connect your console to. You can even power them directly from the USB ports on the console and just have the console connect to that isolated offline network so that you can run the PlayStation Vue application without being connected to the internet. So you have various different options there as well, and that will stop you from accidentally updating the PlayStation Vue application. So anyway, hopefully that covers the main issues that people have been running into and a lot of the frequently asked questions on whether or not you should switch from a previous jailbreak to this one. I would recommend switching up to firmware 12.02, of course, but once you go past 12.02, if you're on 12.50 or 12.52, I would stick with the Blu-ray exploit for now, because it is more stable when running the poops kernel exploit, which is needed on those firmwares. But anyway, that's going to do it for now, so hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and as always, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.